What's the most unexplainable experience you've ever witnessed? I was driving home a few years ago in a car that was only a year and a half old. It was pretty late, and the streets were completely empty. I stopped at a red light. Light turned green the first step on the gas a few times the engine revs, but the car doesn't move. It sounds exactly like it would if my car was in park. I remember being annoyed and checking to see if the car was in park and open drive. I look up, and a huge truck runs the red right where I would have been making my left turn. The truck passes, and my car once again drives correctly. My car saved my life. A barn full of mummified chickens, suspended from 20-foot rafters by their necks. Hundreds and hundreds of them, and all on individual ropes. 30 years ago, and I still think about it. Edit. Wow, this blew up? To answer some questions, I'm not sure they were there to be prepared for food, as it would be way too much work to hang them all individually and with such long ropes. Plus, I can't imagine anyone wanting to eat a desiccated bird skeleton. The barn was abandoned and was knocked over for a new subdivision maybe a year after we found it. Me and my mom were outside a coffee shop, and I noticed a large white bird in the sky. It was too high up to see it in detail, but the way it was circling suggested it was a hawk or eagle. My mom noticed me looking up and commented how she'd never seen a white bird like that. We watched it for about 30 seconds, and all of a sudden it vanished into thin air. It creeped my mom out so much that she changes the subject whenever I mention it. I have a bit of a reverse one. Back in the 80s, emptying a waterbed by siphoning with a hose out the window of an apartment. Everything is going great, and once the thing has been totally emptied, look out the window to see no water on the ground outside. Look closer and notice the person in the apartment below left their window open. The hose had curled into someone else's apartment, and the contents of an entire waterbed flooded their place. So somewhere out there, there's a person who came home to an apartment that was completely flooded with water for no apparent reason. Coincidence 1. I grew up on the West Coast, and at age 16, 1980, my family moved to the East Coast. Age 20, I went to college on the South Coast. My best friend at college mentioned one night that he had lived on the West Coast, and you guessed it, his family bought the house off us when we moved. The ultra-weird coincidence is that his mother was born on the East Coast in the house that we moved into. Coincidence 2. Dad was doing some family tree stuff, and turns out we had a famous ancestor. While checking out his life history, it turns out that he too was born in the East Coast house that we bought in 1980. Edit. Holy shit, my biggest post so far. I've been having sleep issues and was just finally settling down for a snooze, and now I'm so pumped I'm gonna have to suffer another day or two without sleep. Love you guys. Goal. Well, fuck me. I've been gilded. 42 hours awake now. Not a fucking chance in hell I'm gonna get my head down now. Might as well head over to r/Gilded Joan Wild. Thanks to whoever that was. My best friend at college mentioned one night that he had lived on the West Coast, and you guessed it, his family bought the house off us when we moved. I most certainly did not. In high school, I went over to my girlfriend's house to hang out. We hadn't eaten dinner yet, and we were both getting pretty hungry, so we were unsuccessfully debating what we should eat. Suddenly, we hear a thump come from the kitchen, and since we were home alone, we went to investigate. One of the recipe books that her dad keeps on the refrigerator had fallen off, but it was like 7 feet away from the fridge and had opened to a certain page, chicken and mushrooms with rice. So I jokingly said, maybe we should make that? We checked the kitchen, and she had all the necessary ingredients. After we collected them, we turned to the stove, and there was already a large, clean skillet sitting on it, ready to go. My girlfriend claimed she hadn't done it, as she had washed all the dishes earlier that afternoon and put them all away. I thought that maybe she was just messing with me, but she was convincingly serious. So basically, some friendly ghost helped settle a small argument by saying, look you dumb shits, cook this and shut the fuck up. It was delicious, by the way. Before my mom was born, my grandma had a miscarriage. Fast forward, my mom is carrying toddler me up the stairs, in which the wall is decorated with family pictures. I stop my mom in front of a picture of my grandma and tell my mom that it was a picture of my mom. She explains that it's her mom and not mine, in which I replied that she was my mom for a little bit first. A couple of months later, I go running into my mom's room at 5 in the morning to wake my mom up to tell her that I had to go visit my mom today at the cemetery because it was her birthday. Toddler me had no way of knowing this, but I was right. Nothing like that has happened since. I've heard similar stories before, and I desperately want to believe them. I had a stillborn daughter, and the thought that her soul could possibly come back into my life is the most comforting thought ever. Many years ago, I was up in the attic of my parents' house. I slipped off of the boards and put my foot through the ceiling. When I looked through the hole that I had created, I saw the garage. That made no sense. I should have been looking at a carpeted hallway of the second floor, since I was on the other side of the house. I sat there for several minutes trying to wrap my head around what I was looking at. Eventually, I thought, I must somehow be confused about where I was in the attic. I climbed down, walked out of my room, and there was the hole in the ceiling, right where it should have been second floor carpeted hallway. It's been nearly 20 years, and I still can't figure out what happened. Well, it's nothing close to what I've been reading in this thread, but once in 7th grade my class was playing kickball, and my best friend ran up, kicked the ball up to his left, and started running to first base. While on his way there, the ball hit a rafter on the ceiling and went hurtling back diagonally towards him, and it hit him in the face as he was running. Funniest thing I've ever seen. Was sleeping over at friend's small apt, mid-80s, on the floor in a sleeping bag, between his bed and his little sister's bed. Middle of the night, I woke up suddenly, but not alarmed, just suddenly very clearly wide awake. A quiet man's voice in my head said, "You should get up and move." I don't remember even questioning it or it seeming weird. So I got up, over my bag to the foot of his bed, and we'd back to sleep. Sometime later, early morning, there is this huge crash, and we all sit up alarmed. His cat had jumped up and somehow taken down a shelf holding this gigantic wooden 70s style stereo set. The kind with boxy wooden speakers, a turntable, cassette and 8 tracks, etc. Probably 60 to 80 pounds of gear total. It fell maybe 4 feet and landed right where my head would have been. Mike yelled my name and rolled over, didn't see me down there, and looked around panicky-like, and of course I was down by his feet. We just stared for a second and soaked in the implications. Me and 3 friends walking home one night were looking up at the really bright moon. As we were looking up, we saw what seemed to be a satellite glazing across the sky. When it got it to the moon, it suddenly took a left to circle the moon and then zoomed off. I looked at my friends to confirm, and March 4th of us saw it. We all couldn't explain it. We thought it was a satellite that went into the moon's orbit, but that makes no sense really. That was Elfanger's ship. He was crashing at the construction site to give the Animorphs the blue box. This one still boggles my mind to this day. When I was in 8th grade, my family took a trip with another family to Reno. On the way there, we stopped by your typical gas station / convenience store complex. My friend and I stood outside the store, waiting for the parents. On the side of the store, in the dark, was a crotchety, long rolled-up rug that had space in the middle, picture, like a tube. We just happened to be staring in that direction when we saw some weird-ass shit. Describing what it looks like is a bit inexplicable because I never saw anything like it. It was basically a large, thick, whitish-brownish, mucousy worm-shaped object that was slowly slithering out of the rug, like a snake. The thing was way too big to be an animal, and it looked really grotesque. It appeared to be anime because it was slithering out. We instantly ran away, and we swear we saw an alien. Sounds like an Alaskan bullworm. Edit. I never thought a SpongeBob reference would get me my most upvoted comment. I love you all. I was at this market in Adelaide when I was 16. I was sitting on a bench with my boyfriend and his younger brother, eating ice creams from a food van. We were waiting for his parents to pick us up as the market had finished. As we waited, we watched an old man pull his typical old man car into the car park under a tree, get out and sit in the boot of his car. This was pretty weird, but it got weirder. He took off his pants, he was squatting into the boot. He was taking a dump into the boot of his car while we watched. When he was done, he just pulled his pants up and drove off. What? In college, I did the graveyard shift for my job, so I would be up all night and sleep during the day. On one of my days off, my roommate woke up in cold sweats and came out to the living room where I was watching TV. It was 3:46 a.m. He told me he had a dream where his grandfather died. He went back to sleep, and he got a phone call from his dad at about 7 a.m. His dad told him his grandfather died, and on the report it says his grandfather died at 3:46 a.m. I can't explain that, and that creeped me the fuck out. Worked at a wine store for a while. One time I dropped a very expensive bottle of champagne. Can't remember the brand, but it was kept in our specialty wine room. The floor was tile. The bottle dropped, hit the floor, then bounced back up, and I caught it. The bottle didn't break, crack, chip, or anything. It just looked normal except for some extra bubbles. Can't explain it, but it was pretty awesome. Back in 5th grade, one of my friends had gone to the dentist or doctor and came back to school during recess. She had brought all of our friend group these little plastic dogs that had legs which could move, so they walked. After recess, we all put our dogs in our pockets and headed to lunch. We got our food and sat at the table. Then one of the girls pulled out her dog, only to realize 2 of its legs were missing. We looked all around the lunchroom, but couldn't find the dog leg, so we gave up. I opened my milk carton, had been closed the whole time, and saw something floating in it. It was the toy dog legs. Somehow, they had gone from attached to the dog in her pocket to floating in my closed milk carton. Everybody freaked out. My brother and I were 400 miles from home visiting family. We are hanging out with our cousins who brought us to a house that neither of us had ever been to before, my cousin's friend's house. As we pull up and get out of the car, my brother stops us and says, "I've seen this house before." My cousins and I laugh this off, saying that's impossible. But my brother, I insist he's seen it before. "There's a cave in the basement," he said. Now I start laughing because that sounds ludicrous, but my cousins aren't laughing. My brother goes on to describe how the basement looks and where the cave is inside of it, etc. Freaked out everyone, but we did get to smoke in a cool cave in a basement, so there's that. A few years ago, my best friend and I were sharing a house out in the country. One of her children was being fussy and wouldn't sleep, so we decided to take a drive down some back roads. About 10 minutes after I start driving, we are pretty far into the boonies of my city, where the street lines are few and far between, and everything is terrifying. I only glimpsed them, but I swear to God I saw a pack, 3 or 4, of the most mismatched creatures ever. They were like little pigs with human teeth and eyes, but their skin was an odd shade of pink, and it was wrinkly, as if they had all rapidly lost weight. I screamed and floored the gas pedal all the way home. As we neared my house, about 4 houses down, I saw another similar creature that was the same shade of odd pink and had the same texture of skin. This one, however, was taller and standing upright on 2 legs, half hidden in the shadows. We rushed the kids in, but neither of us slept that night. The next day, someone or something had slashed 2 of our car's tires. So when I was a kid, my mom, little brother, and I were in my mom's old GMC Jimmy driving home from some family outing. We're on the highway when my mom gets a flat tire. She pulls off the side of the road, and it starts pouring rain. So my mom is trying to change the tire in the pouring rain, and my brother is going crazy for no particular reason. He was a crazy kid. This moving truck pulls over, and these 2 beefy mover dudes come over and offer to help her. At this point, my mom just wants to get my brother to shut up, and she doesn't feel like she's going to get murdered, so she accepts their offer. After they're done, she takes down the information of the company, so she can call and personally thank their boss. They give her the info and leave. My mom gets home and tries to call the number, but it didn't exist. Confused, she goes to look up the name of the company, only to find out that there's no moving company by that name. To this day, she calls them her beefy guardian angels. I once stayed in room 410 of the Queen Inn Hotel in San Francisco. Woke up in the middle of the night, needing to go to the bathroom, and saw what appeared like a decaying woman with withered flesh and a blue/white glow at the foot of the bed, seeming to stare at me, in spite of having eyes that were just black sunken holes. It was so terrifying I passed out. Woke up in the morning and told my girlfriend at the time about it, and she came over. She laughed, and when I asked why, she said she booked that room because the hotel was supposed to be haunted, that room specifically, and she was using me as a blind test case to see if it was true. Ended up staying there another 3 nights without anything odd happening. We were sitting around a friend's house watching TV, not doing much at all. The discussion turns to, what would you do if you found a genie's lamp? Kind of stuff. What one wish would you make? I said flippantly, I'd wish for some strawberries, because I'd love some strawberries right now. Ha! A few minutes later, there is a knock at the door. My buddies goes to answer it. A few minutes later, he dashes into the TV room and says, "Hey, Gene Kim, you gotta come here, man." I follow him out, and his mom is there with a basket of strawberries. He says, "Say that again, Mom." She looks a little strange and says, "I was just driving here, and there was a guy on the side of the road selling strawberries, and I thought you and your friends might want some." We just look at each other and says, "You blew it, man. You blew your wish on strawberries." I was sitting in my living room watching TV one night. A friend was sitting in a chair to my left. On my right was the wall. Through this wall, without a sound, a small, maybe 6 or 7 centimeters diameter, ball of light emerged, floated horizontally for a few feet, slowly lowered to a few inches off the coffee table, and disappeared in a small flash. My friend saw exactly the same thing. We were talking about it a couple of days later, and the kids, who were about 6 and 8 at the time, overheard and informed us that they had seen the same thing on a couple of occasions. None of us were ever able to explain it. Edit, I should also mention that the wall this thing came through was an interior wall. Anything coming through it from outside would have to also pass through another interior wall and the exterior wall first. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.